All right, the nervous system. Here we go. So the basic cell of the nervous system is the neuron. That's the one that does most of the work here. So uh, there are two types of cells in all, but it's the neurons are the ones that actually transmit the nerve message. The support cells are the glial cells, and they surround the neurons and bring them the nutrients, get rid of the waste, keep them safe. They're support only and such. Of these glial cells, the first one to talk about is the astrocyte. It looks like a star. That's why they call it an astrocyte. But it has these long cytoplasmic extensions and such that then grab hold of a capillary, grab hold of a neuron, and it transfers the nutrients and materials that are needed by the neuron, and it keeps out the harmful stuff. So it allows the beneficial materials through, but it prevents harmful stuff from getting through. So it acts as a barrier. So they call it this blood-brain barrier. So nerve pathway development. There are areas of the brain, some for I don't know, let's just think about for your toe, some for your nose, some for math, some for speaking. And there's pathways through the brain and such to get from point A to point B. And early on in the development, they're not there. And then right near birth and then after birth and such, you get these pathways really honed in or dedicated toward this and such. And it's believed that these astrocytes contribute to that. Next one is the oligodendrocyte. The word oligo means few. So these have a limited number, a few of these dendritic processes that they talk about. But the oligodendrocyte is the cousin to the Schwann cell. Both of these contain myelin. They wrap up the axons and they insulate the nerves and such like that, thereby making the message, the action potential, move or enabling it to move faster from point A to point B and such. So microglia, these are small, right? And these are similar to a white blood cell. So these actually come from mesoderm, so do your white blood cells, and they're protective. They can become phagocytic. So they're like the immune system for the brain. And lastly is the ependymal cell. These cells line the ventricles, these cavities within the brain and the spinal canal and such. And it's through them that the cerebral spinal fluid is produced. So that's their job right there. So there's areas within the ventricles that contain a lot of these ependymal cells, and they're in structures known as choroid plexus, and that's where the majority of the cerebral spinal fluid and such is produced. And it's basically filtering the blood and is letting the plasma cross into the ventricular space. So a lot of bodily humors or fluids and such are all very similar to plasma. So the Schwann cell is similar to the oligodendrocyte. The oligodendrocyte is found within the central nervous system. The Schwann cell is in the peripheral nervous system. Another name, a more technical name for the Schwann cell is the neurolimnocyte, and also don't let that throw you off. But it's once again wrapping the axon or the dendrite in this myelin, which then increases the speed or the rate of the action potential being generated through a process of saltatory conduction. And also that's its job to do right there. And then satellite cells. These support and kind of protect the nerve cells that are in the peripheral nervous system, outside in the body, if you will. These are not like the satellite cells of that we saw in the muscular system, and also these They're just not the same. I don't know what else I can tell you. They're not the same. So back to the neuron. So it is the functional cell, the one that does most of the work there in the nervous system and such. You got a lot of them. You can read that. And they come in different shapes, different sizes, but they all have the same three parts. You have these structures which take the action potential and transmit it or move it toward the cell body, right? Then you have the cell body, and that's the part that contains the nucleus. And it contains the other cellular organelles and such. And then you have an extension that takes the action potential away from the cell body, and that's the axon. So dendrites bring the message into the cell body. Axons take the message away from the cell body. Here's a typical neuron. This is a pyramidal cell or a pyramidal cell, and you can see that it's showing dendrites coming off from this top and then from the bottoms or the sides right here. So they call these apicals and these basilar dendrites and such. And you can follow the axon out, and you can notice that it goes to the end and it branches. Sometimes they'll call those collaterals. Don't get crazy with that. And then they will terminate in little bitty knobs, and those are known as synaptic knobs or synaptic terminals, as this drawing says, but synaptic knobs. When you look at neurons, there's different types, but based on what direction are they moving the message, the stimulus and such. Are they bringing information from the outside into the central nervous system, or are they taking information from the central nervous system to the outside to a muscle or to a gland? So if they're bringing in information, they are sensory. And if they're taking it out, they're motor. Sensory neurons have a very long dendrite to a cell body and a short axon. Most of these sensory neurons, the dendrites are outside of the central nervous system. Such. Motor neurons, flip it, have a very short dendrite, usually within the central nervous system, and then to the cell body, usually within the central nervous system, out. And so the axon travels out of the central nervous and into the peripheral nervous system. And it terminates in either a muscle or a gland. There's other ones that go to a ganglion that's like then running nerves into the viscera, into the guts and such, but still pretty much the same. Interneurons are only found in the central nervous system, and they just connect from neuron to neuron. So sensories are from some receptor to another neuron. Motors are from one neuron down to an effector, either a muscle or a gland, and then interneurons go from neuron to neuron. Now, based on their types, their varieties, you have multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar and such. So multipolar, most of the neurons, the majority in the brain and the spinal cord are multipolar. A bipolar, these are found in your special senses, the eyes and the nose and the ear, if you will. The unipolar and such, these are sensories and such, and these come off of your spinal cord. And so these are the sensory neurons coming into and going in through the dorsal side or the back side of the spinal cord through what's known as the dorsal root. So when you look at this, here we see our typical looking neuron, and they have it labeled again for you right there, and they're showing you the direction of the message. That's how you can then label the axon from the dendrite. And you can see how that one then goes in and interconnects with or intermingles with another neuron. Now, what message is it sending? It could be sending a message that's making that membrane of the next one hyperpolar, or so it can't fire, or it's making it, depolarizing it to the point where it can fire. So it's being either an inhibitory or it's being an excitatory when it goes to the next one and such. The Schwann cells, we mentioned those. They're just myelin, which is a type of fatty material. It's an insulator, and it wraps around the axon and such, and it then supports, protects, but it also helps speed up the action potential that's traveling down through the axons and such. Where two Schwann cells come together, there's a small gap there, and that's also called a node, or a node of Ranvier or Ranois. I don't know how you want to pronounce it, but I go Ranvier so I can spell it correctly. So you have to watch that one. So that's where the action potential jumps from node to node to node. So it enables the action, the message, the action potential to travel many times faster than if it was just moving across the surface of the axon. So this allows this communication between head and toes in thousands, fractions of a second. So it's pretty amazing how fast it goes. All right, let's stop right there.